Hi guys, it's Miss Brown again. Today we are going to be subtracting positive and negative fractions and mixed numbers. In the previous video, I showed you two methods. One method was to actually use the mixed numbers. The second method was to convert to improper fractions. I will not be using both methods this time simply because it takes too long. So all that I'm going to do here is use the mixed numbers. But if you want to convert to improper fractions, if you understand that method, if you have success with that method, then by all means stick to it. So here we go. So we have -1 5/7 minus a half. So the first thing that we need to do is figure out what our integer rule is. Our integer rule is add the opposite, which you guys know as keep, change, change. So that's the first thing that we need to do. We need to keep, change, and change. So I'm just going to rewrite this by leaving the -1 5/7 just as it is. I'm changing subtraction to addition, and I'm changing the positive 1/2 to a -1/2. Okay, so our next step is going to be to follow the addition rules. And since we are adding a negative and a negative, these numbers have the same sign. So our rule is to add them and use the common sign. So before I'm able to add, I'm going to have to find a common denominator. So in order to find a common denominator, you can just list the multiples. You probably already know what it is, but just in case you don't know, let's list the multiples of 7. So 7 times 1 is 7, 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 3 is 21, 7 times 4 is 28, and hopefully that's enough. Let's list the multiples of 2. 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Okay, so what we are looking for is the first number that we find in both those lists. And the first number that we find in both lists is 14, of course. So that's going to be our common denominator. So let's rewrite this and also keep in mind that we need to add those two numbers. So to change 7 to 14, I'm going to multiply by 2. But what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. And to change 2 to 14, I have to multiply by 7. And what I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So rewriting and stacking at the same time, that is going to be 1 and 10/14. And remember, I'm supposed to be adding. So I'm adding 7/14. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is to, and that shouldn't say subtract the fractions. Oh my goodness. That should say to add the fractions. And I'll go back and fix that. But anyway, let's add the fractions. 10 plus 7 is 17. The denominator stays the same. So that would be 14. Then we're going to have to add the whole numbers. So 1 plus nothing is 1. Now, hopefully you can look at that 17/14 and know that that is an improper fraction. To turn that into a proper fraction, what we're going to do is recognize that this line means division, and we're going to take 17 and we're going to divide it by 14. 14 cannot go into 1, but 14 can go into 17 one time, and 1 times 14 is 14. We're going to subtract out. 17 minus 14 is 3. So what we have remaining is 3 out of the original 14 that we started out with. So please know that this is 1, of course, but 17/14 is the same thing as 1 and 3/14. We just figured that out right here. So if we add those two together, we will actually get 2 wholes and 3/14. Now, you might be wanting to say, yay, I'm done. But not exactly. Because remember, we need to use the common sign. And up here, we are adding a negative and a negative. So our answer is going to be negative. Make sure you check your signs. It is a shame to do all that work and get everything wrong because of a negative sign. Now, for those of you who use the other method, let's just check. If I go 14 multiplied by 2, that gives me 28. And if I add 3 to 28, that's going to be 31/14. So if you use the other method and you got 31/14, you're doing great. All right, moving on. The next problem. So our integer rule is to add the opposite or keep, change. So we're going to do that. So keep, change. So we're keeping the 4 and 1/7 as it is. We are changing that subtraction to addition. We're changing the negative 3 2/3 to a positive 3 2/3. All right, so the next thing we need to do is to follow our addition rules. So our addition rules say that if they have the same sign, and they do, both of them are positive, we are supposed to add. I see yet another mistake here. We are supposed to add and use the common sign. So here we go. Before we can add, we need to find a common denominator. So to find the common denominator, of course, we can list the multiples of 7 and 3. So 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 3 is 21. 7 times 4 is 28. Guys, if you don't know your multiplication tables, you need to practice. Listing the multiples of 3. 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, 3 times 6 is 18, 3 times 7 is 21. Yay, we found it, guys. So our common denominator, of course, is going to be 21. So I am going to get the common denominator. So I'm going to have to multiply 7 by 3 to get 21. And what I do to the bottom, I've got to do to the top. I've got to multiply 3 by 7 to get 21. And what I do to the bottom, I've got to do to the top. And I'm going to rewrite this and stack at the same time, keeping in mind that I have to add those numbers together. So I'm going to have 4 and 1 times 3 is 3, and 7 times 3 is 21, and I'm adding, and then 3 and 2 times 7 is 14, and 3 times 7 is 21. Okay, so now I'm going to add the numerator. So 3 plus 14 is 17. The denominator stays the same, so my denominator is 21. I'm going to add my whole numbers. 4 plus 3 is 12. And I'm going to double check that sign. So we were supposed to use the common sign, and this is a positive number, and this is a positive number. So my answer is going to be positive as well. So that is my answer. Those of you who are using the other method, well, you can figure out what that is as an improper fraction to check and see if your work is correct. So our last example, we are going to use our integer rule, which is add the opposite, better known as keep, change, change. So we're going to have to keep and change and change. So we're going to keep the negative 5 and 5/12 just as it is. We change subtraction to addition, and we change that negative 1 7/8 to a positive 1 7/8. So now we have to follow our addition rules. So we know we have different signs because one's negative, one's positive. So we actually have to subtract here and then use the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. So in order to subtract, I need to find a common denominator. And here's where I'm listing the multiples of 12. So my multiples of 12 are 12 times 1 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, 12 times 3 is 36, 12 times 4 is 48. Hopefully we have what we need. And then we have to list the multiples of 8. 8 times 1 is 8, times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times 4 is 32, 8 times 5 is 40, 8 times 6 is 48. Now remember, we're looking for the very first number that we see in both lists. So our common denominator should be 24, not 48. 24. So we are going to think, okay, what I multiply 12 by to get 24, I have to multiply that by 2, and what I do to the bottom, I do to the top. I have to multiply 8 by 3 to get 24, and what I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Now, I am going to rewrite this and stack them up at the same time, keeping in mind that we are going to subtract. Because I am subtracting, I need that larger number on the top, so that 5's got to be on the top. So that's going to be 5, and 5 times 2 is 10, 12 times 2 is 24. And then we have 1, and 7 times 3 is 21. 8 times 3 is 24. And keeping in mind, we are subtracting. Okay, so I try to go 10 minus 21. That's not going to work. So what we're going to have to do is borrow. We come over here and borrow from the 5. That 5 becomes a 4. Now, you guys might be tempted to add a 0 or something to that 10. 100 is not, that's not going to work, guys. So what do? Please remember, when we're talking about fractions and we borrow, we have to add the numerator and the denominator. So I'm going to add that 10 in the numerator to the 24 in the denominator. My new numerator is going to be 34. So this 10 becomes a 34. So now I have to go 34 minus 21. 4 minus 1 is 3. And then 3 minus 2 is 1. And then the denominator stays the same. I have to come over here and subtract my whole numbers. 4 minus 1 is 3. But I'm not done, guys. Remember, we've got to check that sign. We have to use the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. Well, we have a -5 and a +1. A -5 is going to have greater value. So our answer is actually a -3 and 13/24. Now, if you are using improper fractions, I'll let you figure out if your improper fraction is equivalent to that mixed number. All right, guys, thanks and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.